Sorry, boy, but his captain's got to teach his men what happens to those what crossing.
Captain's got to teach stuff.
Good afternoon from the Batcave. It is July 31st, 2024, and we're going to go through Ruth really quick before we jump into Samuel. I should have technically done Ruth probably in the second session of the Judges, because it looks like that's around when Ruth takes place. I've actually struggled with the genealogy of Ruth because it's really hard to stretch this out across the timeline of it's about 400 years. I think it's about like 370 years of the book of Judges before you get to the birth of David. David is going to be born around the time that Saul is chosen as king, and David's going to be about 40 at the end of Saul's reign, which is 40 years, okay? So you have to take this genealogy that's at the end of Ruth, which is going to say that Aminadab begot, well, it's going to start with Hezron. Hezron begot Ram. Ram begot Aminadab. Aminadab begot Nahshon. Nahshon begot Salmon. Salmon begot Boaz. Boaz begot Obed. Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David. And you just look at that in a glance, and you say, okay, that's enough names. But this is pretty tough, because you have Hezron, which is going to be a son of Judah by Perez. So Judah's going to be a pretty old man when he has Hezron. Really, it's technically his son / grandson, because he has him with his daughter-in-law, and he is going to be the firstborn. And then Aminadab is actually going to still be alive, so he's going to go. Judah and Hezron are going to go into Egypt. Aminadab and Nahshon are going to come out of Egypt. So Aminadab is still alive, and then Nahshon is going to be the prince throughout the time that they're in the wilderness. He's going to be counted as the prince in the book of Numbers. And then Salmon is going to be the one who marries Rahab after they get into the promised land. So it does work, and what you need to know about the line of David, and especially the dominant royal line, is they keep getting married and they keep having kids into their old age, okay? So like Hezron, if you read about him in the book of Chronicles, he has a kid like right before he dies, or after he dies. Like their wife will die, and then they'll take another wife, and they'll take another wife, and they will keep having kids until after they're dead, basically. So like Hezron is in First Chronicles. It says the sons of Pharez, Hezron and Hamul, and it's going to tell this story about Hezron, how Ram and this is the elder Caleb. This is not the Caleb who goes with Joshua, but this is the elder Caleb, are going to be his sons. And then he is going to, after Hezron is, his first wife dies, he's going to marry the daughter of Machir, and this is the Machir who's going to be the father of the Gilead. So the Gileadites we're always talking about in the book of Judges, he's related to them because he is married basically to the sister of the guy who's going to father Gilead, okay? So you're going to have this tightness. This is why David is going to go hang out around these people when he's on the outs with Saul, because they're going to be married in with the Arameans. And so basically Hezron is going to have a few more kids with the daughter of Machir, and then after she dies, and he's going to marry this woman when he's 60 years old, and she's going to bear him Segub. Segub begets Jair, and Jair, it says he has 20 cities in Gilead. So they don't just marry in with them; they're living among the Gileadites, these Judahites. Okay, and these are the people that David is descended from. So the Judahites are everywhere, but this guy was with the Gileadites, and this stuff probably happened while the Jews were still in Egypt. Okay, so that's why these Gileadites are over in this territory, and they have Judahites mixed among them. And then it says, and then Gesher, and then he took Gesher and Aram, and so these are areas that were, Gesher is going to be the kingdom where Absalom comes from, and Aram is going to be the area around Damascus that these guys apparently had taken over back in the day during the time that the Jews were in Egypt. And then it says, after Hezron was dead, in Caleb Ephrathah, that means so Caleb is going to have Ephrathah, who's going to have Bethlehem. That's where that city's named after. His wife, it says Abiah, Hezron's wife, which might be the wife from Machir. It says bear him Asher, the father of Tekoa. So he's got sons being born after he's dead, he's still got women pregnant by the time he dies, and he is not young. He's probably in his 80s when. Well, no, I'm sorry. This is Judah's firstborn, so he's probably up around 120 by the time he dies, and he's still having kids at that point. So it makes sense when you go, oh, okay, so there's only 2 generations when they come out of Egypt. Yeah, that guy was probably under 40 when they went into Egypt, and he's going to live another 80 years and keep having kids. So his firstborn son could be like when they're 80 to 100 years deep into or the son that is the next in line in the Davidic line could be 80 to 100 years later. So I want to show you guys that they are in fact doing that by the time we get to Ruth, because when we get here, we know from the story that Boaz is an old man. He's going to mention him being an old man, and he's kind of surprised that Ruth picks him over some younger man. Okay, and we know that David is the youngest of, I think, 9 brothers, so or maybe 7 brothers. And we would assume they have sisters too, but they're just counting the brothers. And for all we know, he could be born of a later wife or something like that. So it's very possible that these guys were all born when they're, I'm averaging 60 to 80 years when these guys are born. And if you've got, 4 times 80, you're going to have 360, okay? So you're going to have, we know Solomon goes into the promised land. Let's say we know he's had to be one of the people who are under 20. But he was probably born while they're still in the wilderness. He's going to marry Rahab sometime after that. Rahab could have been as young as 20 by the time they marry, and then as old as, let's say, 40 by the time they have Boaz, okay? So you could be 60 years deep into the promised land by the time they do that. Boaz could be as old as 80 by the time he marries Ruth, and then they have a kid, and they're going to have Obed. And Obed could have a bunch of kids, and Jesse could be a younger one of them. And then Jesse has a bunch of kids, and David's a younger one of them. So it is plausible. It does work out there. And that seems to be in keeping with the Davidic line. They just seem to keep having kids when they're older, and then the heir of the line keeps being a younger descendant. So I just want to show you guys that the math works out. But the time that the story of Boaz and Ruth is going to take place is going to be in this 80 years because he's going to be a son of Rahab. So you're looking maybe up to 100 years deep into the conquest of the Promised Land, because he picks up Rahab. Rahab's got, again, if she's 20 and she's a prostitute, she's got another 20 childbearing years, and then she's going to have Boaz, and Boaz is going to be up to 80 years old by the time he meets Ruth. So you have Othniel's reign. Basically, they're in bondage for 8 years, and then Othniel's going to give them peace for 40 years. Then they're in bondage for another 18 years, and then Ehud, this is the guy who stabs the Moabite king in the stomach, and then the Moabite king, and then he sneaks out, and Moabite king leaves. Moab is going to become a tributary to, you got to remember, Othniel is out of Judah, and Ehud is out of Benjamin, okay? So Moab is going to be right next door to Judah and Benjamin across the Jordan River, just north of the Edomites, and they make them tributaries during that time. So you're going to have some time where it might be favorable to a Moabite to give their daughter to a Judahite, and that's what's going to happen in the days of Ruth. So the story starts when they're in this 80-year period, and there's going to be a famine, and these guys are going to go live among the Moabites, and of course they're married in with them. So what is more than likely is they're going to stay with their in-laws, where there's more opportunities for food, because food is scarce in Judah at that time, okay? So that's where the story begins. So it says, now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. So we know that Bethlehem exists. So this is going to be Ephrathah, who's going to be a descendant of, I think, Ram, who's going to be the son of Hebron. So whoever this guy is, he's a pretty close cousin to the Davidic line, okay? Now, we're still a few generations from David, but he's a pretty close cousin to that line. And then he says he goes to sojourn in Moab with his wife and his 2 sons, okay? So this is the father. His name was Elimelech, and the name of his wife was Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons, Mahon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. So in other words, they're descended from this Ephrath who fathered Bethlehem, but they're living in Bethlehem. They're descendants of Ephraim. They're not necessarily descendants of Bethlehem, okay? And then it says they came in the country of Moab and continued there. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. And they took them wives of the woman of Moab, and the name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth, and they dwelt there about 10 years. So we know they're living in Moab for about 10 years. We know they took wives after the husband died. So it looks like the husband and his wife, who were both Judahites, went to live in Moab. Now, for whatever reason, they're living in Moab, but it's around the time that Moab's a tributary. Maybe they're involved with that somehow. Who knows? But then after he dies, his wife takes daughters or wives for her 2 sons of the Moabites, and then it says they lived there about 10 years. Okay, so it doesn't say like they were married the whole 10 years. It just says they took wives and they dwelled there for about 10 years. So that could be the whole time from Elimelech coming there to them leaving there, that they're there for a decade. Okay. Then it says that Mahlon and Chilion died, also both of them, and the woman was left. This is King James-ish. She was bereft of her 2 sons and her 2 husbands. So she's widowed. She has no kin left, no sons, no husband. Okay, and she started with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. So in other words, the famine's over. So she set out from that place where she was with her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go, return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me." Okay? So in other words, they were good wives to their husbands. Doesn't look like either of them have kids, though. And she's like, go return to your mother's house. I don't know why she doesn't say father's house. But again, they go and kill all the men of Moab. So it might be they might literally be living in their mother's house because all the men are dead from the battle where Ehud and the Judahites kicked their butts. Okay, so they might have been killing all the men. So it was very advantageous for them to have their daughters married to the Judahites because the men were dead, the caregivers were dead. Okay, and so they're hoping for their sons to grow up and take care of them in their old age, and they got to get rid of these daughters like how. Okay, and so. He says, "The Lord grant you that you find a home, each of you, in the house of the house of her husband." So in other words, she's saying, "May God help you both get married again." She kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, "No, we will return with you and your people." Again, there's not much they can go to in Moab, because if this is not long after the Ehud scenario, most of the eligible men are dead. Okay. So they're like, we would rather go back to you with Judah. We're going to have better prospects of finding a husband there. But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and bear sons, would you therefore wait until they are grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone forth against me." Then they lifted up their voices and wept again, and Orpah kissed their mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So in other words, she's telling her daughters, there is no hope of you finding a husband through me. Even if I met a man today and I had sons tonight, are you going to wait for them to grow old enough for you to marry them? Like, get while the getting's good, okay? You're young, you're attractive, try to find another husband. You're not going to have much hope with me, okay? But Ruth clung to her. Ruth is like, I'm not leaving. She said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." And she's like, no. But Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave." In other words, don't ask me to leave you or return from following you. For where you go, I will go. And where you lodge, I will lodge. And your people will be my people and your God, my God. In other words, I'm with you no matter what. You are my family. Okay? And this is actually appropriate, because if a woman is leaving her household, she is cleaving to the household of her husband and not vice versa. Okay? So she's saying, your people are my people, your God's my God. I am severed from my people now, okay? Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if even death parts me from you. So in other words, the only thing that's going to take me away from you is if I'm dead, okay? Or no, he said even death. So even in burial, I'm going to be buried next to you. She's like, I'm with you no matter what, okay? It's like an Avril Lavigne song. And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. So the two of them went on till they came to Bethlehem. When they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" And she said to them, "Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitter with me." So Mara means bitter. She's like, just call me bitter. My life sucks. Okay? I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. In other words, I went away with a husband and 2 sons, and I came back with nothing but a daughter-in-law, who is pretty much dead weight because there's no employment for women. Okay? So it says, "Why call me Naomi when the Lord has afflicted me and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me?" So Naomi returned, and Ruth and the Moabites and their daughter-in-law with her, who returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Now Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's man of wealth of the family of Elimelech, that was Boaz. Okay, so in other words, he's related to Elimelech. Okay, now this Elimelech, I tried to find him in the genealogical records and Chronicles, and remember, this is Chronicles is years later, and there's no reference to him. But what it looks like is they're both descended from Ephrathah. Okay, so whoever this Elimelech is, they're both descended from Ephrathah. So is Boaz. And what you would be looking at is people are, from this Bethlehem, probably like 3-4 generations down. So at most they're going to be like second, third cousins. Okay, but the point is they are related through this common ancestor from a few generations back. Okay, so maybe they have like the same great-great-grandpa. Okay, and but Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, he said, "And Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, 'Let me go into the field and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I shall find favor.' And she said to her, 'Go, my daughter.'" Okay, now the Judahites are keeping the law, which is that you let the poor glean from your fields. Okay, in other words, if stuff falls to the ground while you're getting your main harvest, leave it there. If stuff is growing, they're allowed to go around the edge of your fields. Obviously, they're not allowed to go take a big harvest from it, but they can go around the edge of the fields picking the grain like the apostles did in the time of Jesus. Okay, so she's going to go glean from the ears of grain from the field and collect food for her and her mother-in-law to hopefully survive through whatever, the winter or whatever. Okay, and so she set forth and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and she happened to come to a part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was the family of Elimelech. So in other words, she's going through the what is publicly allowed for the poor to do, which is to glean from any of these fields, and she lands on Boaz's field. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and he said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." So Boaz is an older guy. He's been at this for a while. He's got some good crops going, and people like him. Okay, so he's got all kinds of pros like working for him, gleaning his field. And Boaz said to his servant who was in charge of the reapers, "Whose maiden is this?" In other words, whose maiden? Now he says maiden doesn't necessarily mean she's a virgin. She was married, but whose young woman is this? Okay, so the point is that, let's see what we got here. She's a young woman. Okay, so let's assume, remember, they were only there 10 years. Let's assume Ruth is under 20. She could be a little upstairs at 20, but she's probably not. She's a young woman. Okay, she married a guy. That guy died. They were in Moab a total of 10 years, and she didn't get wives from them until after her husband died. So you're probably looking at, she was probably married to a guy for a year or two, but he died. And who knows how he died. We don't know what happened with her husband and these sons, but there she is. She's a young lady. She's never had any kids yet, but she ain't a virgin. So he says, to whom does this young woman belong? And the servant who was in charge of the reapers said, "She is a Moabite woman that came back with Naomi from the children from the country of Moab." And she said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reapers." So she came, and as she had been on her feet from the early morning until now, without resting for a moment. So she has been on her feet, picking grain for her and Naomi all day long, collecting all the food she can. This is survival mode for them, okay? And Boaz said to Ruth, "Now listen, my daughter, do not go and glean another field, nor leave this one, but keep close to my young women." Okay? Now I want you to hear this. Now we don't know if Boaz has another wife, or if he's had another wife that's died already, or if he has other kids, or he's been single his whole life. More than likely he's got an estate. Obviously he's got fields and farms and stuff like that, enough to hire workers. So he's probably had a wife, and he's probably widowed by now. Who knows where his sons are? We don't know. Maybe he hasn't had any sons. We don't know. Okay? But he's got this much younger woman. So I want you to imagine a guy who's between 60 and 80, and you got this girl who's practically a teenager, like maybe she's 18, 19, 20, right? And she's gleaning your field. So he's calling her my daughter. He's treating her like a grandfather would a young lady, right? And says, do not glean another field but this one, but keep your eyes close to women. And most of your people want to tell this story, want to make him younger and make her older to make this look more romantic than it is, but it is not. This is very practical, okay? The idea of an older man taking a much younger woman as a second wife is a matter of upkeeping and survival for them, and it's a matter of having children and extending his name and his clan or whatever in the earth to the man, okay? So don't think of this as like, oh, and he was just, she was like, 28 and he was like maybe 38. No. He's an old man and she is a very young woman, okay? And he said, keep your eyes on the field that is being reaped and follow behind them. I have ordered the young men not to bother you. If you get thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from them that the young men have drawn, okay? In other words, he's saying nobody's going to harass you, okay? Now, this is a foreign woman with no man, okay? This is a foreign woman with no man, a young woman, probably young, attractive woman with no man who's obviously impoverished. He's telling his men, don't touch her, okay? He knows that she came back with her mother-in-law, and she is basically survival for her mother-in-law. She is collecting food for a woman that is probably like maybe a cousin or an aunt type person to him, in relation to him. And so he knows what she's doing is very thoughtful and decent. And he's like, don't you be hitting on this girl. Okay, don't you mess with her. And quite frankly, she could get raped. This could be what happens among people like this because they have no protector, okay? Then she fell prostrate with her face in the ground and said to him, why have I found favor in your sight that you should take notice of me when I am a foreigner? But Boaz answered her, all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother in your native land to come to a people that you did not know before. So he respects the crap out of this young lady, okay? And then he says, may the Lord reward you for your deeds, and may you have full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come from refuge, okay? Under whose wings you have come from refuge. Now, this is important. You guys are going to hear me talk about this concept a lot, this overspreading, this covering, okay? And this wings. So Jesus is going to say to the Jews how I would have spread my wings over you like a hen gathers her chicks. Or he talks about spreading his wings over the Basra when the Jews are gathered in there, okay? And this concept of being covered, okay? He's saying, may God cover you and be a refuge to you, okay? And it just so happens God is going to be a refuge to her through him, okay? So this is something that the righteous think about, covering, okay? And I just got done working on a translation of Corinthians, and when we get to that, probably over a year from now, we're going to talk about covering, what it talks about a woman being covered, okay? Because this is like a primary importance in the doctrine of God, okay? It is not something that is about misogyny or just men being bigger and stronger and over authority. It's about a man covering a woman so as to let her dwell in his home, provide for her, and then also it's a type of redemption. It's a type of Christ being clothed with Christ that is being carried out between a man and a woman when it talks about this concept of covering. And so what goes on in a marriage and what goes on in a woman being covered, in other words, being under authority in church and not just speaking out on her own, is meant to be a reflection of the Godhead and Christ in the church. Okay, so it's meant to be a reflection of the relationship between God and the Holy Spirit, and also between Christ and the bride of Christ. Okay, and so you're going to see this concept keep coming forward throughout the Bible as you read. It's not left and right, but it's there persistently because these people thought like that. Okay. Now, he says, then she said, may I continue to find favor in your sight, your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, even though I am not one of your servants. At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come here and eat some of this bread and dip your morsel in sour wine." So she sat beside the reapers and heaped up for her some parched grain. She ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. Okay, so he's not only like letting her glean from his fields, he's like, come take a break and have lunch with my farming crew. Okay. And when she got up to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, "Let her glean even among the standing sheaves, and do not reproach her." In other words, the standing sheaves would be what they harvested for themselves, okay? So they would harvest it and they would put it in a bunch and it would stand there, okay? And they're saying she can harvest even among that if she wants, okay? Don't just limit her to what falls on the ground, because he knows it's not just for her, it's for Naomi, who's his relative, okay? So he is just an all-around good guy. He cares for family. He cares about, the responsibility to take care of your relatives, especially widows, right? And he even is looking kindly on this foreigner who's a widow, okay? And so she gleaned in the field until evening, and she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. So of all her full days of work, she gets, what's an ephah? She gets an ephah. It looks like it's about a gallon bucket-ish. So she's been working all day, and she's collecting all this grain. She beats out the grain. She ends up with a bucket of grain that's going to last them maybe a few weeks. She's doing all right, okay? I don't know how far you can stretch some grain, but she's got a bucket of grain. She picked it up and came into town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gleaned. Then she took out and gave to her what was left over after she herself had been satisfied. So she's working in the mountains of Judea, okay? She's from the lowlands of Moab. She's huffing. This woman is in shape. She's huffing. She is collecting grain. She's beating it out. She's ending up with a bucket. She's carrying this bucket of grain home, okay? Her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean today, and where have you worked? And blessed be the name of the man who took notice of you." In other words, somebody allowed you to glean their fields without giving you guff. That's pretty good, because not all Jews were so nice like that. Remember, they just got through a famine, okay? So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, the name of the man with whom I worked today was Boaz. In other words, I worked in his fields. And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "Blessed be the Lord, blessed be he by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." Naomi also said to her, "The man is a relative of ours, one of our nearest kin." Okay, so she's dropping a big hint. Okay, in other words, he's somebody who could redeem you under our law. Okay. So then Ruth the Moabite said, "He even said to me, 'Stay close by my servants until they have finished all my harvest.'" So he's even kind of likes me. And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It is better, my daughter, that you go out with his young women. Otherwise, you might be bothered in another field." In other words, he's obviously got other women who glean in the field like this. Taking care of widows is the thing you do. And because these guys are regularly going to war, there's going to be widows on occasion, okay? Otherwise, you might be bothered in another field. Now, this word bothered, I read it in the ESV, says to impinge by accident or violence, by importunity, come, cause, entreat, fall upon, make intercession, entreat. So when they say bothered, they don't mean like bothered. They're like, otherwise you might get raped in some other field, okay? So you found a field where you're safe and you can hang out with women who are under the protection of this guy who has a reputation, okay? So stay there, don't go elsewhere, okay? Otherwise you might get raped. So she kept fast by the maidens of Boaz to glean until the end of the barley harvest and the wheat harvest, and dwelt with her mother-in-law, okay? So it looks like there's about a 6-month time span that they're spending, she's spending harvesting, picking grain and stuff like that, barley and wheat, and living with her mother-in-law, okay? And then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee, that it may be well with thee?" In other words, would you allow me to try to hook you up? That's what she's saying, okay? "And now is not Boaz our kindred with those maidens that thou was? Behold, he winnoweth barley tonight in the threshing floor. Wash thyself therefore, and anoint thee, and put on raiment on thee, and get down from the floor, but make not thyself known to the man until he has done eating and drinking." In other words, get yourself looking cute, and get down there while he's eating and drinking, because it's kind of like a harvest festival, okay? But don't let him see you until he's done eating and drinking. And it shall be when he lies down that you shall mark the place where she lies. Like, take note, because he's probably going to... It's guys getting together, right? They're coming in from the fields, and they're kind of having this harvest festival because they're done with the harvest. Kind of like a Thanksgiving, but not quite. And take note of where he's, they're gathering together, with their stores to celebrate, and where he's going to go put his bed down, okay? And he's like, and mark the place where he shall lie, and you should go in and uncover his feet and lay down, and he will tell you what to do, okay? She uncovers his feet and lays down, okay? And she said to her, all that thou sayest unto me I will do. So this is like saying, in a aggressive yet appropriate way, I need a man. And she went down to the floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law bade her. She bade her. Come on, King James. All that her mother-in-law instructed her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk and was in a good mood, in a contented mood, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. And she came stealthily and uncovered his feet and lay down. So she snuck in while he was sleeping. And she basically just, like, pulls the covers off of his feet. His feet's going to get cold in a minute. And then just laid down there next to his feet. Okay? Now, what is she saying? What is she symbolizing with this? And she's symbolizing, can I get under the covers with you? Like, hint, hint, hint. Because he's going to wake up and his feet are cold. And he's like, oh, burr, my feet are cold. But this whole woman is uncovered right next to my feet. And my feet are cold. And it'd be nice to make them warm. And here's this woman who is completely uncovered. And so she is, like, saying with not much subtlety, like, you think it's bad for your feet to be cold, try being completely uncovered. And so that's what she's doing. And so she's saying, cover me. I have no covering. I'm a woman out on my own. I'm fortunate enough to be gleaning from your field, so no one just rapes me and tosses me aside because I have no value to them. So at midnight, the man was startled. Oh, my feet are cold. What the heck? Oh, there's a woman here. What the heck? I swear I wasn't drinking that much. And he turns over, and there was lying at his feet a woman. He's like, I only had like 4 glasses of wine. This is no way. I didn't. And he said, who are you? And she answered, I am, because it's dark. Remember, it's pitch black out, okay? I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak over your servant, for you are next of kin. She's proposing to this dude, straight up, right? Now, if you're 65 and you've got like some 19-year-old cuteness coming up to you and be like, you need to be my man, you're like, that's aggressive. However, this is a very humble and good woman who's been taking care of her mother-in-law, and she's just a good woman. And this is what he said. May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. This last instance of your loyalty is better than the first, for you have not gone after young men, rather poor or rich. Okay? In other words, he recognizes that she is a woman of good character, and she recognizes that he is a man of good character. Now, here's the thing. She's not doing anything but what her mother-in-law tells her. Okay? She's just a good, obedient, submissive woman who her mother-in-law has given her instructions, and she's doing as she's told. Okay? She's being wise. So she says, and now, my daughter, do not be afraid, and I will do for you all that you ask, for the assembly of my people know that you are a worthy woman. Okay? In other words, you've got a good reputation. You've been working very hard to provide for your mother-in-law, and everybody knows it. Okay? You are not just some floozy, like, scampering about our village. But now, though it is true that I am a near kinsman, there is another kinsman more closely related to mine. So he's been plotting already. Don't think he was just like, oh, I never thought of that, okay? He already knows who's like the next in line to basically redeem her. In other words, you have the Levirate law. And here's the deal. If he has a child with her, that firstborn child, she's going to get the inheritance of Naomi, okay? Because the inheritance of Naomi is what belonged to her husbands and then would have gone to her sons, but they're all dead. So whatever inheritance these guys have in terms of land, They don't have any men to farm this land, but they have land, okay? And she would be the next in line for that if she had a husband. But she doesn't have a husband. And so the firstborn son that a man would have in her would count as the son from the man she left, okay? And that son is going to be the son of the Levirate marriage, who is going to get the inheritance. So in other words, that land that belongs to, by inheritance, her, is hers, and whoever she marries, until she has that firstborn son, and then it goes to that son and becomes, the in the lineage of basically the man she married and his father. Okay, so whoever marries her is going to get this land and can make money off this land for a time, but when that son comes of age, it's his land, so they're ultimately going to lose it. Okay, and they have to take care of this young man the whole time, so they might make money off his land, but they also have to take care of an extra woman and an extra kid, okay? Now, or however many kids she has, okay? So the idea is if this is a Levirate marriage alone, and this is not going to be your wifey wife, this is going to be a Levirate marriage alone, you're trying to give her one kid, because you're not trying to make a bunch of kids that you have to take care of if this woman is not going to be your number one wife, okay? And that firstborn is going to get whatever beneficial inheritance you got out of her. So you got to work that land, make money off it, and most of that money is going to go to taking care of her and that kid, and then you're going to lose that land later. Okay? So it's not a massive benefit for you financially to marry another man's widow so you can get his land. Okay? Unless he's got a big chunk of land. But these guys have all these laws in there that you ultimately give back the land after a certain amount of time, and it keeps going back to who's supposed to inherit it. So nobody really accumulates a big chunk of land, okay? You don't have these massive corporate farms and stuff like that. So anyways, there's another guy in line, and this guy has been checking the genealogical records because he's like, don't think he's just like, I'm too old for her, and I'm going to let one of the younger guys get her. No, he's like to the younger guys, don't touch her, and he's already checking. Let me check the logs here. Let's see how many people I got to get through to get to this girl, okay? So he wants her, okay? And he says she's not just a young and cute woman. Remember, these guys are going to marry into their old age and keep having babies till they're dead, okay? She's not just a young, viable woman with childbearing hips. She is also a good woman who has the kind of character who she's going to take a big leap of faith to take care of her mother-in-law, okay? So he says, now my daughter, do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask, for the assembly of my people know that you are a worthy woman, but now there's a nearer kinsman to me, more closely related than I. In other words, I got to do something about this other dude. Okay? Remain this night, and in the morning I will act as next of kin for you. If he will act as next of kin for you, good. In other words, if this other man will take you, that's good for you. Okay? So I'm going to let that go. But if not, I am willing to act as next of kin for you, and then as the Lord lives, I will act as next of kin for you. Lie down until morning. Okay, so he is not like, so come get under the covers and snuggle up to me. And no. This is pretty sacred duty here. Okay, you don't mess around with this girl. Okay, but he probably is like, here's the blanket. You can have the blanket. I'll just get up and go for a walk, take a cold shower. And he said, so she lay at his feet until morning. Apparently she laid at his feet. But got up before one person could recognize another. In other words, really early. For he said, it must not be known that this woman came to the threshing floor. In other words, you got to leave before people think something happened between us. Okay? And then he said, bring the cloak you are wearing and hold it out. So she held it, and it measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her back, and she went to the city. So he just gave her a robe full of barley. Like, here's some food for you. Tell Naomi I said, good looking out. And she came to her mother-in-law and said, how did things go with you, my daughter? And she told him all the man that he'd done for her, saying, he gave me these 6 measures of barley and said, do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. And she replied, wait, my daughter, until you learn what the matter turns out, for the man will not rest until he settle the matter today. She knows what kind of man he was. She had a suspicion that maybe he liked her, and she was right. So she knows. She's like, this is gonna happen. It's going down. So no sooner had Boaz gone up to the gate and sat down near the next of kin, of whom Boaz had spoken, came passing by. to this guy who's in the way, okay? He's, by law, the guy who is next in line to redeem you, give you a baby. And Boaz says, come over here, friend. Sit down here. Come here, young man. And he went down and sat down. Then Boaz took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. And they sat down. So he's like, I'm going to get some witnesses for this real quick. Put this guy in the spot, okay? And he said to the next of kin, Naomi, who has come back from the country of... I want to tell a story, but I won't. Then he said to the next of kin, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling a parcel of land that belonged to our kinsman Elimelech. So Elimelech, remember, is the original father of the two men, okay? So he's saying Naomi is selling this parcel of land. In other words, she needs the money to eat, okay? She's an older lady. She can't farm this land. She can't afford to hire anyone to farm this land, so she's going to sell this land, okay? Now, under the laws of redemption, she would get it back after 7 years. But if you just get the land for 7 years, you don't owe her nothing. You're paying her for the land, and then you can make as much money as you can off the land, okay? So I thought I would tell you about it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it. But if not, tell me so that I may know. So if you're not going to buy it, I'll buy it. You're next in line. For there is no one prior to you to redeem it, and I come after you. So he said, I'll redeem it. I'll buy that land. In other words, I'll give her some walking around money, and then I'll have the land, and I'll put my men to work farming that land, and we'll make more money than we spent on the land, and it'll be good for me, and then after 7 years, she'll get it back. Okay? Then Boaz said, the day you acquire the field from the hand of Naomi, you're also acquiring Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead man, to maintain the dead man's name and his inheritance. See, I didn't think there was anyone coming after her because she died and her sons died, and I would basically keep that land into perpetuity. And then Boaz said, let's see, I would have to marry a Moabite, a foreigner, so she's got no inheritance. And then, I would have to raise up a child to her, and then that child would get the land ultimately. Not as good of a deal. I'm not looking to take on extra burdens. I was just looking to pay Naomi for the land and just be done with the deal, not pay for the land and then pay for this woman and then pay for the child and then the child gets the land. And this is not looking like as good of a deal as I thought. At this, the next of kin said, I could not redeem it for myself without damaging my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Now, this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning the redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, one took off a sandal and gave it to the other, and this was the manner of attesting in Israel. In other words, should we shake on it? No. Men shake hands all the time. Give me your shoe. That's how we know in front of all these people. He gave him his shoe. We seen it. We seen his gift. Anyways, and when the next of kin said to Boaz, acquire it for yourself, he took off his sandal. You can have it. You can have it, and you can have her. Then Boaz said to the elders of the people, today are your witnesses that I acquired from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. So in other words, all their inheritance. I've acquired it. I've also acquired Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Mahlon, to be my wife, to maintain the dead man's name on his inheritance, in order that the name of the dead man may not be cut off from his kinsmen and of the gate of his native place. Today you are witnesses. So in other words, that firstborn son is going to be counted as a descendant of Ahimelech, who is descended from Ephrathah, who is the Benjamite. Okay? Then all the women who were at the gate, along with the elders, said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make this woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you produce children in Ephrathah and bestow a name in Bethlehem. Okay? And through the children that the Lord will give you by this one young woman, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. In other words, Perez is who pretty much the biggest main tribe of Judah is coming from, and he came from a young woman when Judah was old. So may it be like that. And Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and when they came together, the Lord made her conceive, and she bore a son. Now, I don't know if this is necessarily concluding that this is her firstborn son, because it just says the Lord made her conceive and she bore a son. Then the woman said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord who has not left you in this day without next of kin, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and nourisher of your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you is more to you than 7 sons, has borne him. So Naomi is getting a young man out of the deal who, she's already probably at least a middle-aged woman. And now when she's an old woman, she's going to have a young man around who's going to help take care of her, okay? Because he's ultimately going to redeem the land, okay? Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom and became his nurse. And the woman of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi," and they named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse, the father of David. So it does look like it's her firstborn child with him, but this is where I'm a little confused, okay? And the reason is because if he's the firstborn, he wouldn't be counted as the descendant of Boaz. And that's where I'm a little confused. Now, because Ahimelech and his two sons should have been, Obed should have been counted as the son of Ahimelech. So that's where I'm wondering if that is not necessarily her firstborn child, because her firstborn child should have been counted as Ahimelech. So she possibly could have multiple children, and Obed was a later one. But it is saying that the woman gave him a name, saying a son has been born to Naomi, and they named him Obed. So it does suggest that he's the firstborn. So I'm not exactly sure how this works out with the Levirate law, because under the Levirate law, he would not be Boaz's son. But here, he's counted as Boaz's son. It says the descendants of Perez. Perez became the father of Hezron, Hezron of Ram, Ram of Aminadab, Aminadab of Nahshon, Nahshon of Salmon, Salmon of Boaz, Boaz of Obed, Obed of Jesse, Jesse of David. Okay? So what we know for certain is she's a young woman and he's an old man. Naomi is an older woman. And he has Obed. We don't know how many years take place. We don't have any genealogical records that tell you how many years takes place. He does seem to be a firstborn child, but somehow they omitted to attach him to Ahimelech and her husband, whatever his name is, Mahlon or whatever. Just as Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Mahlon. Okay, so he's not, for whatever reason, counted as the wife of Mahlon. He's counted as the wife of Obed, and that could be because that guy just has no descendants left, and this is his house. Maybe he doesn't have any other sons. Okay. And if he doesn't have any other sons, and that other genealogical line or whatever is gone, taken away completely, and killing a man and his two sons seems to be God kind of taking away that genealogy completely, then Boaz might have just picked it up, because there is no one else to attach him to. But he was supposed to have been, again, the son of Mahlon, the son of Ahimelech. So I don't know how that works. I honestly don't. But this is going to be the descendant of David. And so David is going to have Moabite in-laws, because you have Boaz and you have Obed and you have Jesse. Okay. So David's grandmother is a Moabite. Okay. So this is important. David has a Judahite grandmother and a Moabite grandmother. Okay. And the Moabites are going to take in his father, because remember, it's Jesse's grandmother. It's David's great grandmother, okay? So the Moabites are going to take in Jesse, David's mom and dad, when things get rough with him and Saul. The Moabite king is going to take them all in because they had a good relationship with him, and Saul did not, okay? Saul is actually going to attack the Moabites, okay? So whoever's not my enemy is my friend, and David is going to be chilling among the Geshurites, who the Hezronites are going to be living amongst, and then among the Gileadites, and then among the Moabites, and then finally among the Philistines by the time Saul's dead. So he's got a good, I think it's like 17 years or something like that on the run, where he is laying low in the outskirt regions of Israel where Saul can't get him, among people who are kind of on the outs with Saul. Okay? So that's it for Ruth. Again, this whole covering thing, you want to understand this subject, because if you don't understand it, you're going to find yourself getting offended at men-women things unnecessarily. Okay? The idea of men being over women is not about being a boss and just telling you what to do. It's about being covering. It's about being somebody who is responsible for their care, responsible for their protection, and a foretype of Christ, who ultimately covers us. He puts his wings over us. He wraps us in a new flesh, right, in his new body. And that's what a man is supposed to be doing with a woman. He's not just enjoying her comfort, he is also her comfort. Like his body is her body. And all of that ultimately is meant to point to us becoming one flesh with Christ and taking on his resurrected body. Okay? So when you look at men, women stuff in the Bible, and you look at covering stuff in the Bible, don't think in terms of these feminist, misogynistic dynamics that are floating around today. These things are of the world. They don't understand these spiritual things. We compare spiritual things with spiritual things, and this concept of a covering goes all the way back to God putting a second skin over Adam and Eve to clothe them. Okay? It's a second skin, and that is a type of Christ's resurrected body that we're ultimately going to be donned with, where Peter says we are going to be further clothed when we put off this tabernacle. Okay? So you want to be mindful of things like tabernacles and coverings and tents and garments and stuff like that in the Bible, because they prefigure the ultimate new covering, which is our new home in the New Jerusalem and our new bodies in Christ's resurrected flesh. Okay? You want to look for these things because you have here a Gentile bride who is given a covering by a Judahite in the line of David, just like his mother, Boaz's mother, was Rahab the harlot, another Gentile bride who was given covering by Boaz's father in the line of David. Okay? So you're seeing this pattern now form of Gentile women. Remember, Judah's daughter, Tamar, is a Canaanite. Rahab's a Canaanite. Ruth is a Moabite. Okay? And all these women are all going to be in the genealogy that leads down to Joseph in the Gospel of Matthew. Okay? And so you see this pattern, and they're going to be in both, because all three of these women are going to be before David is born. Okay, and so both the line of Mary and Joseph is going to have Tamar, Rahab, and Ruth in it. Okay, three Gentile women who have been covered and given a new heritage in the line of Judah, in the line of David, in the line of Jesus. Okay. So these are prefiguring our being covered, all of us Gentiles being covered by the blood of Jesus and being brought into the household of Israel, which is the household of God, okay? And being covered by that new flesh of Jesus ultimately, okay? So enjoy Ruth. Remember when you stick it in there, if you're going to try to be chronological, you want to stick it after Ehud goes and kills the Moabite king, and it's right after that. And then somehow you got to milk out something like 200 and some, how many years, let's see, we have here. We have 120, 130, 40, 136 years, something like that. And then you've got from Rahab to David, you're going to have something around 240 years. So somehow you got to stretch 3 generations over the course of 240 years, which means you got to drop 80 years in each. Okay? Which means these people are having kids in their old age, very much in their old age, to get to Saul being born by the time, or David being born by the time Saul is king. And when we jump into the next one, we are going to read from Samuel, the beginning of Samuel, who is going to be, he's a kid around this time. Samuel is going to be an old man with grown sons by the time he crowns Saul as king. So Samuel is going to be born. We're going to put his birth somewhere around here. He's going to be a little kid while Samson's doing his thing. And then he's going to be under the priest who's going to judge Israel for, I think, like 40 years. And then he's going to judge Israel for like 30-some years. And then he's going to anoint Saul king. And he's going to have some overlap with Saul's ministry. And then he's going to die. Okay? So we're going to read the life of Samuel up until Saul is king next time. And then talk through that. But we're getting ready to leave the period of the judges and go into the period of the kings. Okay? So I hope you guys are blessed by this. Again, this is going to be attached to my series on the rise of the kingdom of Israel, and it's going to keep going until we get to the apex, which is Solomon, and then it's going to be the decline and fall of the kingdom of Israel. So hope you guys are blessed by this. Hope you have a great rest of your week. Batman out. Peace.
Cover me, and I walk alone. Cover me, yeah, must dance and stumble, and cover me, yeah. We trip on through the sands of time, and cover me, 'cause I've been brave.